Good morning, everyone. This is Sam Allred. I bring you greetings. I'm in my home office as you are. I'm in Heber City, Utah, and it is absolutely beautiful today. Thank you so much for joining me for this special management presentation. I thought about that this morning. This may be, well, there's a lot of things unique about this one. The time, certainly, that we're in, the topic, because of the time, the fact that not only am I giving this in my home office, but you're largely listening to it in your home offices. It's the first one in my memory that we've ever started even a couple minutes late, and that just because as we looked at the list of attendees, it's just clicking off as fast as it can, and we wanted to wait just a couple minutes for that. Let me just mention at the outset, this is entitled Managing or Leading During a Crisis. Very simply, my focus this morning is to share some thoughts and ideas and encouragement as you lead your firms and your people and your clients in these challenging times that we're in. So let me start with this thought. What a year this past month and a half has been. I mean, honestly, who could have imagined in January that we would find ourselves facing the current challenges that we have? So many things have changed in the past 6 weeks, and you and I are having so many new experiences. I want to mention just one because of something that happened this week. So on Tuesday this week, my wife and I needed to go into our local Wells Fargo bank and to make a wire transfer and sign some papers. As we have become accustomed to doing, we wore our face shields, our face masks for protection. And on Wednesday morning, I get this text from one of my sons. He lives in New Jersey, and he sent me a meme. It said, "Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd go up to a bank teller with a mask on asking for money." And I laughed when I saw that, and I sent him a reply back and said, "Your mom and I did that yesterday, and we got away with it." And he sent me back a reply that said, "Nice." These are interesting times, and every single firm has had to climb a mountain in the past 6 weeks. And in all honesty, to some, it has truly felt like a climb up Mount Everest. Kudos for your leadership through all of that and your continued leadership. Lately, I keep remembering what's reputed as an ancient curse. May you live in interesting times. The past 45 days have certainly been interesting, but also stressful and for too many heartbreaking. And my prayers, as well as yours, go out daily for those who are suffering in so many different ways. And as I think about this, even the financial crisis that we had in 2008, 9, and 10 seems to pale in comparison because of the accompanying COVID-19 pandemic. A feeling that's shared by everyone, regardless of age, is this thought: I don't ever remember anything quite like this happening in my lifetime. And many of us have reached out to those older than us to ask them if they've experienced something that moved that quickly and covered the globe as fast as that. And I remember I had a discussion with my mother, talk to her regularly, always have, and this is a wonderful opportunity to connect with loved ones. But she's 88 years old, can never remember something like this. My wife's mother turned 101 on April 5th. She has all her wits about her, has a great memory, doesn't ever remember anything like this in her lifetime happening this quickly and this expansively. And I want to begin this management presentation with some words of encouragement. And I sent this out in an email that was to many across the profession, but we'll get through that, through this crisis that we have. Of that, I have no doubt. And that's not meant to be a rah-rah speech. It's a fact. History articulates the resiliency of humankind. Our profession will emerge from this crisis on higher ground, facing incredible opportunities. In so many ways, this crisis will make our firms stronger than ever before. I absolutely believe that, especially in light of what I'm seeing firms doing right now. And for each of you personally as leaders, I want to point out that your leadership in a time of crisis will leave a more lasting memory than anything else you do at any other time. Now, I don't say this to unnecessarily add additional weight to an already heavy burden that you might feel, but as a reminder that lasting impressions are made when leaders face challenging times. I've always loved this quote by Coach Landry, maybe never more so than now. He said, leadership is a matter of having people look at you and gain confidence, seeing how you react. If you're in control, they're in control. So, with that as a backdrop, here's the roadmap I want to follow for the next 50 minutes. I first want to take you back to our January, February mindset. That may sound strange, but there's reasons I want to do that. Bear with me on that. And then I want to share some specific lessons we're already learning in the midst of this crisis and how effective these and important these lessons are. And then I'm going to spend most of my time on just what I've called some do's and don'ts of effective leadership during a crisis, some recommendations, and a few warnings. And then, if time permits, I'm going to respond to questions that you might have. So let me start with our January, February mindset. At the beginning of this year, we're in the midst of unprecedented growth and success. It seemed like every time you ever looked, the stock market registered a new all-time high. And the phrase I kept hearing over and over and over again was, we had or were having our best year ever. And parenthetically, if you're forced to enter a crisis, a time of crisis, what better position would you want to be in than that? So many managing partners told me this is the best year we've ever had. I just heard that time and again. The beginning of this year is when we reach out to so many. So between January and early March, prior to when the crisis hit us, Tim Bartz and Jeremy Clopton and myself, we visited over the phone with well over 100 managing partners across North America. We do that every single year during those months. We asked them to openly and honestly respond to two key questions. And really the two key questions can be boiled down to this. What's your firm's biggest challenge that you face? Some of them named more than one, but most of them focused on their biggest challenge they had. And what's your firm's biggest opportunity or your goal or goals or initiatives that you have? And I want to share kind of the Cliff Note version of what we heard in those discussions, because I think it's relevant to where we are right now, even now that we're in a crisis that we didn't anticipate at that time. Here's the three biggest buckets for challenges. Certainly talking to over 100 managing partners, it's quite a list of challenges, but we put them into buckets because of their commonality. And the first one was far and away the biggest bucket. Across the board, virtually every managing partner said the biggest challenge they faced was a people challenge. How to recruit, engage, develop, and retain enough of the right people. I honestly hope that leaders will not lose sight of that, even though temporarily a crisis is in front of us. Because literally just 2 months ago, that was the single biggest challenge that firms across North America faced. The second challenge could be put into a bucket called partner-related issues. Partners that were serving as barriers or roadblocks in some way. And I listed some of what we heard. They're non-compliant. They won't do what they're asked to do or fall in line with everyone else. There's poor accountability. They're too busy. They're stuck in comfort zones. They only do things they're comfortable doing. They're poor stewards over firms' resources and people and time and so on. They largely serve as historians. They have a silo mentality. They're poor coaches. They're stuck in quadrant one where everything's urgent and important. They're gatekeepers more than gate openers. They're highly resistant to change. That was the second bucket of the biggest challenges that managing partners were facing across the profession. And then the third one was smaller than the first two, but it was larger than all the other things that we heard. And so we formed a bucket, and it was just embracing change. And the comments from a number of managing partners could be summarized by this quotation, there's a lot of changes coming and we suck at change. That at the time in January, February, very early March was the mindset of managing partners across our profession in terms of the challenges, the mountains that they were facing in their firms. All right, let me shift gears to the second question that was asked them. What are your biggest opportunities or your goals or initiatives? And most of the managing partners were very excited about the goals and initiatives that their firms were taking on and shared in great depth what they were doing to climb those mountains and tackle those goals. And I please listen carefully as I discuss, and I'm just going to take the top 4 initiatives. You'll recognize with well over 100 managing partners, there was a whole lot more than 4 initiatives, but these are the 4 biggest buckets that came out. Some of these are quite large, discussed by a majority easily of the managing partners. As I discuss the top 4 initiatives, reflect on whether these initiatives are still valid during the present crisis. In other words, do they still make sense? And even more importantly, can we make progress on each one even during a pandemic? I want you to think about that deeply because one of the biggest mistakes we make is to abandon the plans that we had because it's a new world and everything needs to change. I ask you to really think about that as I go through. I'm going to go through these quickly, these 4 initiatives. Initiative number 1, which was probably the top one of collectively of all the managing partners we talked to, connect with team members. Be proactive. Improve your people situation. Some of the things that came out of that, connect with your 3 to 6 year staff, those who largely leave our profession in groves. What's not working for them? Why is it so difficult for them? What kinds of needed adjustments do we need to make it more tolerable and viable for them to stay with the firm and make the firm their career rather than think they've got to look somewhere else? Provide growth opportunities for our best and brightest people. Be intentional about that. Recruit the right kind of people to join the firm. Many partners had bought into the book. It's a Patrick Lencioni book called The Ideal Team Player. And it talks about the 3 attributes that an individual has that makes them a great team player. They're humble, they're hungry, and they're smart. And smart is EQ, not IQ. It's people skills. And many of the managing partners said that's a focus for them. Paint your own picture. That's a phrase I heard from several, but that's a mindset that many had. How can we create a culture where for each individual you can create the kind of career that means the most to you, that makes the most sense for you? How can we create a one-size-fits-one approach to creating a career that you want to have within this firm? And then for many of them, they looked at hiring talent advisors, individuals that had a deep desire to help people grow and were assigned to their people up to a certain number for each talent advisor that would make sure they got the feedback in a regular way that was constructive and helpful and honest, made sure they got directives and help to play to their strengths and have stretch goals and work on things that were meaningful and stretching them towards their ideal career and so on. That was the first initiative, connect with their team members. The second initiative, closely following it in terms of the numbers of managing partners, it said this is what one of our main goals is, become an advisory firm. And I just mentioned what a lot of them said. Choosing to function as someone's advisor is more of a mindset than a set of steps. The uppermost thought should be, how do I add value? Or how can I help this client become a better organization or become better? That was the second primary goal and initiative that so many firms in our profession had taken on at the beginning of this year. Initiative number 3, grow non-compliance services. And initiative number 4, improve the success of our engagements. Do more and better planning up front. Consider involving or hiring or using project managers on our larger engagements and create a pricing team or pricing teams that were more effective at sitting down and giving the clients options and setting the proper pricing for the engagement rather than simply put our head down, do a bunch of work, and bill them for whatever the hours were. There were other things in that, but the fourth initiative in terms of its size and bucket was how can we improve the success of our engagements? I asked you to think about those four greatest initiatives across North America. Are they not still relevant? Can we not make progress on each of these even in the midst of a pandemic? Let me shift gears then and talk about some of the lessons we're learning in the midst of a crisis. What are we seeing out there that we're learning? I'd say first and foremost, it's that firm members adapted quickly to working remotely. I mean, this will easily become one of the greatest blessings to come out of this crisis. And in many cases, firms were up and running in 2 to 3 days. I mean, so much for thinking we suck at change. That was a major change that happened in a very short window of time. And when you look back at it in perspective, when there wasn't a choice, people put the packs on their backs and started climbing the mountain and made great progress up the mountain in a very short period of time. It's kind of what change leaders call following the Cortez method. When Cortez took his ships and arrived at the New World, a lot of people on his ships saw what they saw and didn't like it and said, we want to go back. And so he burned the boats and everybody thought they would stay. It was in that sense, we have to do it. Let's go make it happen. It was amazing. I've heard from so many firm leaders. It was amazing how quick that change happened and how successful it was and still is. Leaders are already discussing the likelihood of reduced office space in the near or the foreseeable future. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I can think I was in numerous meetings with executive committees as they were discussing the possibility of reducing their footprint, their office space, some by as much as 30 or 40%, even as they continued to grow. Those were the very progressive firms. Now, many more management teams are discussing the same possibility as things will resume to normal in the coming months. And that will be a change that will happen across our profession. I think a good change in a lot of ways. During this crisis, many firms have functioned as their clients. I'd say firms and individuals have functioned as their client's trusted advisor without needing to wait for an invitation. This shifting role will be another significant blessing to come from this crisis. I mean, 2 months ago, management teams were discussing the best ways to get their managers and senior managers and partners to function as trusted advisors with their clients. And now everyone in those positions feel like they've been given a green light to be a trusted advisor to clients. It is one of the significant opportunities that has come because of this pandemic, especially for those firms that are looking to make it stick. Firm leaders have learned how resilient their people are and how willing they are to be great team players, to pitch in and do what's needed to service clients and to help out other team members. We've all learned the importance of maintaining connection, both business and personal. It's been enjoyable to talk honestly to so many managing partners during the past 5 weeks and hear about all the efforts to maintain a firm culture in the midst of a work from home environment. I've heard a lot of creative ideas for remote happy hours and remote meetings and town hall meetings with team members. And I just say kudos for staying so connected to your people and realizing how important that is and how important culture remains, especially now during this crisis. Firms have been able to help clients remotely. and have learned how much clients appreciate the firm's willingness to share expertise. I have heard of so many webinars and virtual town hall meetings that have been attended by thousands of clients. What a collective impact you've made on behalf of your clients. That's been an awakening, an insight as to how much we can help our clients collectively. At the same time, that's not been our forte. If you think about the past, we only think of serving clients one at a time, and we've been able to help so many clients at one time remotely because of this pandemic and using technology. So let me then shift for the rest of this management presentation. Let me talk about some do's and don'ts of effective leadership during a crisis, and also provide both some recommendations and, as I said earlier, a few warnings, some warning shots across the bow. Some are obvious, some are not. Carve out some time regularly to stay informed on current events happening around you. Read and listen to wise and informed experts. Let me just pause there for a minute. We live in a world, even prior to this crisis, we live in a world where everybody has access to share their thoughts, and there's a lot of noise. Find those who are reliable, wise and informed experts. I don't think this is hard to do. I think we want to do this. It was interesting that probably 5 months ago, I got rid of the news app on my phone. I was sick of just constantly being bombarded with messages and voices and people sharing their thoughts and ideas or whatever. And I just removed it from my phone and thought, I don't want it. I don't need it. I'll seek it out when I want it. And now it's interesting, like you, I check several times a day to find out, especially what's going on in the world. But I found that there's experts that I've come to rely on. I like the soundness. They're not drama kings or queens. They're really basing their thoughts and ideas on facts. And I think it's important that we surround ourselves with those individuals that we can listen to and stay informed. Don't be paralyzed into making decisions, especially into delaying decisions. It's okay to make a decision, learn new information, and then make adjustments to it if needed, change it if needed. Several years ago, one of the great managing partners in our profession, a dear friend, asked me to read a book that he had read. It was titled Persuadability. The author is Allred is the author of that book. I found the book fascinating, as he did, why he asked me to read it. Persuadability is the genuine willingness and ability to change your mind in the face of new evidence. The book really helped me understand the importance of making timely decisions, especially in the midst of a crisis, and then seeking to stay informed. So often we want to wait until we know something's perfect before we do it, and often we're tempted. The tendency is to wait too long. Also, with this, it's important that you empower stakeholders within the firm to make decisions and work to not punish missteps. Encourage them, make the best decisions they can. Ask for help whenever needed, but don't get paralyzed into not making decisions. Strive to be a voice of reason. Acknowledge the reality of the current situation and look towards positive outcomes. Work to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. There's no value in crying about the current situation or adopting anything like a victim mentality. It's what it is. How do we make the very best of our current situation? Accepting what we have and looking how to make the very best of that situation becomes vital, absolutely vital, in the midst of a crisis. And then this is really, really important. Continue to set stretch goals for yourself, for the firm, for those within the firm. Don't let time simply pass without a desire to move to higher ground. For so many reasons, that's healthy. That's important right now. Continuously strive to get better, even during a crisis. Listen to this carefully. You might find that you can move some dials better now than you could in times that were more prosperous than this. So look at the things that need to change, look at the progress that can be made, set stretch goals, and keep moving forward. That's a vital part of leadership for yourself and for those that you lead, especially during a crisis. Don't assume that information creates informedness. Communication more than normal. During updates, reinforce your firm's direction. Provide guardrails. Ensure everyone knows who to go to for resources and decisions. Find ways to communicate regularly, not only to your clients. I get copied on a lot of that, and I see you doing that, to your people. Keep team members informed of how the firm is doing. When we go black, go dark, stop communicating, there's a human tendency to assume the worst. Keep communicating. I've got to be honest with you, and you know that this takes effort, but it's important that we do that. Make sure that everyone understands priorities, both new and established priorities. In a crisis, people may have a hard time figuring out what can be set aside and what is absolutely essential and what they ought to work on first. Setting priorities encourages people to take care of business and themselves. I've got to be very honest. In our profession, we have struggled to teach priorities effectively. I know that as a consultant when I've interacted with so many firms full-time for the past 21 years, that so many struggle to understand and think in terms of priorities. When they have a to-do list, everything on their to-do list they treat as equal importance. That's not true at all. Can never be true. Take the time to discuss this at all levels across the firm, especially with teams on a regular basis, and talk about priorities and what's most important. And then this is really important. Continue to invest in your people. One of the great disappointments in the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 was that so many firms stopped developing their people, and that put them at a significant disadvantage when the market began to come back. Your consistent focus and goal with your best people should be to help each one, listen to this, increase their skills, competence, and ability in every 3 to 6 months. I've always felt like that's the pattern of at least every 6 months, you're working with your people to intentionally increase their skills, competence, and ability. It may be that in a crisis, it may be that when we are practicing social distancing, it may be that when people are held up in their homes and they have a tendency to get a little bored, that we need to do that more often than just every 6 months. You need to be intentional about stretching them towards growth opportunities. Again, every 3 to 6 months, they need the next growth opportunity, something that challenges them and stretches them, something that they're not comfortable necessarily with, meaning they already know how to do and do well. Let me just point out one thing, just kind of tangentially here. The single biggest barrier that stands in the way of developing our people is how much time they spend doing things they already know how to do. Therein lies one of the biggest weaknesses of our profession. And I love our profession. I'm proud of our profession, but it's not without weaknesses. And one of the greatest weaknesses we have in our profession is the vast majority of our people spend the vast majority of their time doing things they already know how to do. That is the single biggest barrier in the development of somebody. That's why we need to be intentional and look and say, what new thing does this person need that they've not had before that's going to stretch them and challenge them and get them out of their comfort zone? because all growth comes when we get outside of a comfort zone. Think about that. That's significant now as well as any other time, maybe even more so now than at any other time with what we currently are facing. Be wise about making people decisions, especially with those who have impressed you in the past. If you've got team members that through their production or behavior or effort or attitude or desire that have impressed you in the past, can you remember that just 2 months ago, the number one issue we faced was how do we get enough of the right people and keep them and motivate them and retain them and develop them? And that just beyond this present crisis, we've got incredible growth opportunities. In our profession, it's really important that you choose to retain your best and really good people. If you choose to lose good people in the midst of this present crisis, you've got to understand it may take you 18 months or longer to find adequate replacements to those people. I just can't say it more emphatically than that. Be really wise about making people decisions, especially in the midst of a crisis. We can learn from what we saw in 2008 and 9, both from those firms that made really wise decisions and those firms that made poor decisions, and how those decisions affected them moving forward. The first phrase on this slide might be a bit disconcerting. It's meant to be something of a warning shot across the bow. Beware of groupthink. I understand it's helpful to reach out, to touch base with our peers, to find out what they're thinking. I just give you something of a caution, because what I saw in 2008 and 9, again, the financial crisis, many firms lost significant ground because they listened to peers and they hunkered down in what I can only describe as a survival mode. Look for opportunities to make a difference with your best people and with your best clients. You've got incredible opportunities to do that. You've got the time and the opportunity and the technology to make that happen. Don't miss that opportunity. And that's all I'm saying here. Be careful about groupthink that would lead you to believe, man, it's time to hunker down and just survive so that we can get through this. There are so many opportunities that we need to take advantage of and should be taking advantage of. Now, on top of that, find ways to keep your team members connected. Not everyone's work at home environment is the same. Some people are really challenged. I think for me, we're empty nesters, at least for a period of time, and so working from home is wonderful. It's easy. It's what I'm accustomed to. Some people aren't in that situation. Sometimes a personal card or a note or a text or a phone call can be something of a lifeline to someone who's struggling with their personal status quo. It's so vital that we look at how we continue to strengthen and maintain culture during this time of a crisis. Ensure that your partners are proactive with your firm's very best clients. I'll call those very simply the A and B clients. I remember a time, this was in 2000, the latter part of 2009 or 10, when a good friend of mine that was up in Montana, that owned a business outside of Montana. He wasn't my client, but he was a dear friend, and I had made a commitment that I would take him and his 3 grown sons on a fishing trip for a couple days. And so we were on the Yellowstone River in Paradise Valley in Montana. And I remember as we were driving, I had another friend of mine with a boat, and I had a drift boat, and we were taking them up to where we were going to put the boats in the water. And Craig, my good friend, who also is a significant business owner, he was sitting next to me in my Jeep as we were driving up, and I turned to him and said, Craig, listen, we're 2 years into a recession. We were talking about, he was asking me about my career and what I did, and I told him I spent my time working with accounting firms that I loved, and that and he asked kinds of things they were trying to do, and I mentioned one of them back then was be a trusted advisor. And then I turned to him and said, Craig, certainly you have a trusted advisor, and he nodded his head and acknowledged that. And I said, listen, we're 2 years into a recession, a significant recession. How many times has your trusted advisor proactively reached out to you just to ask you, how are you doing? And I can still remember, and I don't think I'll ever forget it, with a voice that had some degree of disgust, he said, zero, not once. Not one time have I proactively heard from and he used the word advisor, I think somewhat reluctantly, to ask me how I'm doing. I was talking to a managing partner, this is now about 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about this pandemic and the change and what we're doing, and I was just so proud of his leadership where he said, look, we identified every single client, business client, that needed a proactive contact. And he said it was a significant number. And we went to the partners and said, here's the ones obviously you have assigned to you. They knew that. By this date, you need to proactively contact everyone and report back. And he talked about what they learned individually and as a firm by proactively reaching out, and the need to continue to find ways to do that, not have that be a one-time thing. We need to make sure that our partners are finding ways to be freed up, transferring work responsibilities to others, and we're freeing them up so that they can be proactive with our firm's best clients. Nothing sends a message like I care more than being proactive, especially at this point in time. Free up your best team members to leverage their time with your client base and proactively reach out. Let me be really honest about this. This recommendation may not be so obvious to everyone. In this crisis, many of your clients are seeking similar information, needing similar help. As you've already found, they are far more willing to connect to webinars and virtual town hall meetings than ever before. This focus should continue long after the present crisis has passed. Leverage your very best and most impressive team members to be able to impact as many clients as they possibly can by doing it in a leverage fashion, not just the traditional one-on-one. Use this as a launch pad to become more leveraged as a firm. I wish I had a lot more time to talk about that in way more depth. That to me is a significant opportunity. Be cautious in your dealings with D-level clients. Getting paid by these clients in a booming economy was uncertain. Be very intentional in your communications with these clients. Would you spend some time and really study those words and the meaning of what I say on that particular slide? You need to identify real time which clients are struggling and take proactive steps to protect yourself financially. I've been so proud of some of the firms that I've talked to, some of the managing partners and management teams. They've literally sat down and identified in some depth what are the indicators that a client is struggling. I mean, they're laying off people. They have flows of revenue that have significantly decreased and so on. And then they've identified a list and said to all of the partners and others with client responsibilities, look at this list, connect with clients, and we want to know immediately when you have a client at risk. Then they've discussed the talking points they need to have with those clients, those at-risk clients. If there's a lesson that we absolutely need to learn from mistakes that were made, significant mistakes made in 2008 and 9 and even 10. It's avoiding the tendency of simply putting our head down, keep working like crazy without acknowledging who we're doing the work for, and then realize we got to write off a bunch of this work because the clients aren't going to pay it. They can't even afford to pay it. We need to get a lot wiser. We need to be better stewards of our own firm for our people's sake and, frankly, for our clients' sake. We need to be wise in what we do. Even in booming times, D-level clients were at risk paying us. Be really, really wise in what we're doing at this time. And then one other thought with that, don't adopt the 2008 mindset of writing off a bunch of work because clients are cash strapped. My mind was boggled with how much work we wrote off, services we wrote off in 2008, 9, and 10. Find ways to work with clients. If you need to, defer a portion of their payment for up to a year rather than choosing to write it off. Don't adopt that policy of just writing it off because times are tough. Let me share something of a story a little bit. Several weeks ago, I was down in Arizona. We went down for 2 weeks. It was just cold here. You couldn't even get outside. And we thought, well, if we're going to be stuck in a home, let's be stuck in a home somewhere where it's warm, where you can go out in the patio or even walk around the neighborhood and keep distance from everybody, but where it's warm. So we went down there for 2 weeks. While we were down there, I developed a sore throat. It wasn't a COVID thing. It was just a sore throat, but I was somewhat concerned about that. And so I went in early in the morning to have that tested. I have somewhat of a history of having strep throat more often than somebody ought to have in their life. And I just wanted to make sure if I had that I had the proper medicine that knocks it out. And so I went in because of this being the crisis time that it is. As I walked in the front doors very early in the morning, about 7 a.m., there was a nurse stationed there. She had me wash my hands with sanitizer. She had me put on a mask, and she tested me quickly to see if I had a fever, which I did not. Later, when I was visiting with the doctor and she was testing my throat to see if I had strep throat, she mentioned about a fever, because I never did ask the nurse if I had one. I just assumed I didn't. I felt okay there. And I asked the doctor about that, and she said, Mr. Allred, if you had a fever, every one of us in this hospital would know instantly that you had entered the hospital with a fever. I thought about that a while. Can we create an environment within our firms as it pertains to clients at risk that we know immediately when we're engaging a client at risk, that everyone knows? And I'm not trying to carry this too far. I'm just acting in a voice of concern for our profession. We need to be wiser than we've been in the past with this. This mindset of just putting our head down and just doing work for everybody and then later seeing if we can get paid is crazy. It is crazy. Be wiser than that. And many firms, I've been proud to say, are really smart in how they're approaching that. I've been very pleased with what I've heard from so many. Maintain an attitude of gratitude, regardless of your circumstances. I'm saying that not only individually, but with your teams and as much as you can as a firm. Gratitude is always admirable. It's always nice to watch. It's always great to be around. Make a point of collecting and sharing positive messages that have gratitude in them. I had a previous managing partner, dear friend, who's now retired, and he shared with me at the beginning of this week something that came from somebody that's we both have as a favorite author. Andy Andrews has written some wonderful books, and both Mark and I love his books. And Mark shared with me something that Andy Andrews sent out. I'm going to read a portion of it. I recognize it's a prayer, but there's a lesson in it that I thought was significant as I read it. I'm going to read just a portion of this. Lord, despite all we see and hear, we vow to remain grateful. For we know that you will allow us to see the truth with proper perspective even during this situation. Let those of us who have enough to eat during this time not forget those who don't. Neither should we forget that in our midst are children who have never had enough to eat. Let those of us with roofs, walls, and dry places to sleep remember the 1.6 billion people in the world who lack adequate housing. Similarly, for those of us forced to work from home, remind us to be grateful that we have a home from which to work. And for those of us who are working, let us remember those who, for whatever reason, cannot. Allow those of us who are inconvenienced during this time to remember we are inconvenienced in a country that, because of its many blessings, has a totally different definition of inconvenience than do many countries around the world. There are billions of people, and we know this, who would do anything for the chance to live at the level about which we sometimes complain. May those of us who've had to cancel vacations remember those who have never been able to take one in the first place. That's a portion of something that was sent that helps me to maintain gratitude. That I'm getting chats. Can you get a copy of that? Yeah, I can find a way how to send that out to Kelsey, and she can send that out. That is from Andy Andrews, a prayer from Andy Andrews. You could probably Google it. I haven't tried that, but I will tell you when I read that, that had a profound effect on me because it helped me to be grateful where I, like everybody, can find a tendency to complain about something. That's part of maintaining an attitude of gratitude. And I think we need to do that with all of our people. And there's so many things out there right now that can help us do that. I see things like that on a daily basis. And finally, please don't plan to revert back to normal once the present crisis comes to a close. Use the present time as a stepping stone to a better, firm future. We can choose to be forever changed in a better way as a result of this crisis. And that's one of the things that we have great hope. Thank you. Kelsey just sent a link to that. Thanks so much, Kelsey. We can choose to be changed for better. I mentioned that at the beginning of this management presentation. I'm a firm believer this can and will make us better firms. In so many ways, I recognize it's a crisis. I recognize it's a pandemic. But in so many ways, it's serving up opportunities for change that we never could have got to in any other way. Look for those. Look for the things that we can use as stepping stones to be better firms in the future. All right, I'm going to take any questions that you have or try to get through those. I'm going to cover, I always promise Georgia, she puts these slides together. I actually don't even look at them till now, but whatever she's got that's upcoming, I always tell her I'll spend a minute or two with these. There's a new management presentation series called Growing Strategically. It's a 4-part series. You see it starts in May, 2 sessions in May. They're the same ones. It's just repeated for somebody that may miss the first one. 2 in June, 2 in July, and 2 in August. So it starts in May. A session is each month, and there's 4 of them. Jeremy Clopton is going to be giving that. It's very much focused on one of the keys that so many firms have is how do we grow, especially now in the face of this pandemic. Also, Jeremy's doing a Launching Data Analytics intro webinar on April 24th. He has taught that boot camp, the Data Analytics boot camp, I want to say 4 or 5 times, and it's been full every time. We anticipate that a trend to continue because that is a wonderful service that firms need to really embrace. It can be used internally, it can be used externally with clients. The whole focus of the boot camp is how do you make it profitable? Turn it into a service that's profitable. He will be launching a new boot camp. It will be 100% virtual, and it will be on June 15th through the 19th. He'll explain how that's being done. It's going to be a little different than obviously than the normal one. And so that intro webinar will discuss how that's going to be. The Emerging Leaders Academy, our ELA program, is going to launch in June, as it always does. There'll be an intro webinar I'll be giving on May 6th. I think that'll probably last about 30 minutes. The program registration deadline is May 15th, as it always is. And this year, one of the things is it has an option to be completely virtual for people. Most of it is anyway, and always has been for the last 12 years. It's got 600 people in it, so it's been around a long time, and it grows it seemingly every year. But much of it has been virtual. It has the opportunity this year, and I'll talk about that on May 6th, to be 100% virtual for those that choose to make that happen. And then one last slide that I see, there's 3 new webinar series. One will launch in May with 2 different sessions. I'll be giving one of those, and Tim Bartz will be giving one of those on making sound decisions in the midst of a crisis. This will be detailed information on making sound people decisions and making sound financial decisions, May 7th and 12th. We're doing a series called Coaching with a Purpose. I can't even begin to tell you through the years how often we've been asked to do coaching training. The closest thing that we do to coaching training is our guide training. For those that are in the ELA program, they have a guide, and I give a guide training, a different one every 3 months. So if you have somebody in the program for 3 years, you only get 9 of those, plus there's one to start off the program, so you get 10 of those. And I've been told through the years that's the best coaching training people have ever had. We're going to do sincere, direct, detailed coaching with a purpose training, 8-part series of webinars beginning on May 29th, given by the Upstream team on what do you need to do to be an incredible coach and make a difference with the person you're coaching. Make a noticeable career difference with the person you're coaching. And then there's a series we do every year, career development series. It's geared towards people below the manager level within your firm. It's an 8-part webinar series. And this year, the focus will be, how do you get really good at managing people around you? We're trying to teach them how to learn managing other skills before they become a manager. And we really believe we can do that effectively. It's an 8-part series. It starts on June 23rd. And we're excited about that. Those are always having huge attendance and huge impact, and allow us to help those, again, across firms below the manager level. All right, let me take some questions that have been chatted in. A comment, Casey Peterson. His firm calls this the Great Reset of 2020. I love that. This is a chance to, again, unlearn things, rethink things, approach things differently. We talk about unlearning as if it's doable and easy. Unlearning is very difficult when everything stays in the status quo. It's so difficult to unlearn what we've already learned and how we already think when everything stays in the status quo. I'm not going to call the pandemic a blessing. I'm not crazy and I'm not insensitive, but I will say it's giving us an opportunity to unlearn things in an amazing way. I love that thought, the Great Reset of 2020. How do we balance the urgent needs of our clients and the needs of our employees who are all facing their own challenges? Well, I think you open lines of communication. First of all, I don't recognize the weakness of any consultant, myself included, is you see a difficult question, you want to give an easy answer. Please recognize that's the weakness of any consultant. That's just probably comes with the territory, if I could say it that way. But it starts with really communication. This is going to sound strange, but I'm going to say it anyway. Most of us have learned in our marriages that our spouse wants us to talk, not solve their problems. I can tell you I've learned that. I've relearned that 100 times. I don't know if it's been 100, but quite a few times. That what my wife needs is she needs me to listen. We need that. Our clients need that, and our people need that. So start with communication, and the biggest part of communication is listening, and not listening to respond. I've said this so many times that it sounds just like repetition, but repetition is not a bad form of learning. What you need to do is listen to understand. And for many of us, we're not there. We've not, and again, I think the current crisis will help us with that. again, because it helps us to unlearn, but listen to understand rather than listen to respond. We need to make sure we understand what our clients are dealing with. We need to make sure we understand what our people are dealing with, and we need to recognize each one is dealing with something a bit different. There'll be some similarities, but each one is dealing with things a bit different. So we need to recognize that we need to spend our time and listen first. Second, and this comes a little more as a warning than just as advice, our best people demand the least amount of our time. Often our clients are the same. Be wise in where you're allocating your time. Reach out to your best people, connect with them. They generally have the ability and the mindset to handle many of their own problems and to manage their own expectations and do many of the things that keep them from ever being high maintenance. But it's important that we reach out to them, that we connect with them. I haven't talked to you in a bit. How are you doing? How are you dealing with this? How are you feeling about that? Do you have any concerns and worries? Anything I can help you with? Anything you want to discuss? They may not, but just that interest is important that we connect with them, because that applies to our people as well as our clients. There are those that tend to be high maintenance, and they're probably during a crisis even more high maintenance. Recognize some of our very best clients and our best people are just not that way. And then it goes back to priorities, trying to help them understand priorities. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not trying to be insensitive about that, but we have a crisis. And with that, we have restrictions and challenges and changes and whatever. How do we best deal with those things? And sometimes we need to talk people off the ledge from a mindset standpoint, the panic ledge, if you will, and just be able to deal with, this is what you need to focus on today. Focus on this today. Then we can talk about the next steps or whatever. Again, that voice of reason I mentioned earlier, people need to hear that. They really need to do that and understand that. Listen, I've reached the end of the time. If you've got other questions, there's my email address. I'll take any that have come in. I'll respond to those that have come that I didn't get to. Very best wishes to you in these trying times. You need to know that many of you I know personally. I know you as leaders. I've watched you as leaders. I've got great confidence in you as leaders. So best wishes to you in your leadership in these challenging times. We'll see you later. You have a great day. Bye-bye.